This is a machinist chest. A lot of people know it as a Gerstner chest, although Gerstner is a brand name. The machinist chest is used traditionally by machinists to keep their tools, small little tools, tap and die sets, wrenches, things like that. But the modern woodworker or modern hobbyist often gets one of these things to keep their woodworking tools in, keep sets, designs, different things. And it has different unique features. Mine is not exactly like the Gerstner. It's obviously a knockoff by another company, but back in the early 20th century, several companies were making machine chests like this. And so I'm going to assume that mine is from that. Some of the things that you can use a machinist chest for, you could use it for tools. An example of that would be putting some tools in some of the drawers. Additionally, I'm a puzzle hobbyist. I like to collect puzzles and solve puzzles. And so it's something you can use for that as well. Here's Hanayama puzzles and also a non-Hanayama puzzle as well. Or, alternatively, you can use it for these John Claude Constantine puzzles and one Sebastian Spiel puzzle up in the upper corner there. Now, I should note that these drawers only have a certain depth. There's 3 different sizes of the drawers, 1, 2, and 3, and of course these all have a certain depth to them. So you're limited in what you can put into them as far as puzzles are concerned. Puzzle boxes would be too large, although you could maybe put it up in the top. Now, for a traditional machinist chest, there would be a panel here covering up the drawers, so you can't access the drawers. In fact, you can't access anything until you get into the top. The Dutch chest that I have back here, that I have a separate video for, has the same feature, where you, in order to get into it, you have to open the top, and then you pull a tab up or a key, and then you can open inside this panel here. And so for this, it's very much the same process. You open this up, and then there's a little spring, and when the spring pops up, it will unfasten from the board, and then the board can come down. Usually the board comes down and goes into the slot below. Now, on my machinist chest, we don't have the panel. I have pulled all the drawers out and looked inside to see if it looks like maybe there was, but it doesn't have the locking device at the top. So I'm not really sure how that was done, and maybe there was not a panel before. They just had the shelf at the bottom. So my machinist chest belonged to my grandfather, and he gave it to my uncle, and my uncle gave it to me. And so I've brought it home to use for my hobby uses, and I'll go into that in a little bit. On my machinist chest, turn it around a little bit here. See, there's a crack, and nobody knows where the crack came from. Before my grandfather acquired it, it belonged to a neighbor, and it's very possible that the neighbor had it somewhere else in the U.S. and then moved to Arizona. And in that shift of environment from wherever they came from to Arizona, the dry weather of Arizona caused the crack. That's my suspicion. Also, the original did not have the handles. I added that later. After I acquired it, I put the handles on. And these handles are just gate accessories purchased from a big box store. Continue moving around. This is what the back looks like. We got a couple. I think this is one complete panel that has since cracked in the middle, and then the rest of it. And like a normal Gerstner or any other machinist chest, this does have the metal corners in the different spots. Plus, you have some bands up here, and so it has most of what you have on a traditional machinist chest. You have fasteners on the sides, in addition to the 2 in the front. So, my machinist chest is used primarily for my hobbies, different hobbies. Primarily art, but there's also some other things I do as well. So I'm going to run through the machinist chest, see what's inside. Move the fasteners. Top comes up. And so that's what top looks like. No mirror. A Gerstner would have a mirror. We don't have a mirror in this one. And there's no place where the mirror could have been either. So different things I have colored pencils. Water-soluble colored pencils. Masking fluid for doing watercolor paintings. Pair of scissors. Watercolor brushes in a roll. I have a water pen. And then I have a set of gouache paint. The thing about the top compartment is you want to have anything that can't fit in any of the drawers would go in the top compartment because you've got 2 or 3 inches of depth up here to work with. And so that's why things go up there that belong up there. And it's also sometimes things you don't need to get into as much. Now, if you've got the panel, you're going to have to get into the top first anyway in order to remove the panel. But since I don't have the panel, I have easy access to the drawers and the slot at the bottom all the time. So the rest of it, let's start from the bottom since we can sort of see what's down here. I have a couple color charts. It helps me with painting and some of the coloring I do, mixing up and that sort of thing. This is helpful for both art projects as well as woodworking projects. So there's a lot of universal use there. Then I have some watercolor paper and a palette for acrylic paints. Moving up, in the largest, deepest drawer, I have acrylic paint. And so that's a good place to keep it, those tubes, small tubes. And if you've seen some of my other videos, you will have seen some of these tubes also in a video that I did called T-Chest, T-Chest puzzle cabinet, demonstration of the T-Chest. That was built specifically to house more of these. And so it was actually, the drawers were made to the size to fit that kind of paint. Moving up, next drawer, paintbrushes. Lots of paintbrushes, a couple acrylic palette pans. It's a good place to keep those. These brushes are for watercolor, acrylic, gouache. I don't do oil painting, so there's nothing in here for oil painting. Now this next drawer up here is used a lot for woodworking. And so it can be used for art, but I use it primarily for woodworking. This is where I keep drafting tools, things like triangles, little French curves, and most importantly, the architect's rule or draftsman rule. This is very helpful using graph paper. Plus, there's always a compass, or one of these, as well as pencil and an eraser. Also keep an eraser in here. So any pencils, anything like that would be kept in here. So the next step up, we have the small metal drawers. Now, on most machinist chests, these are wooden. This one, it's actually 3 metal sets of 3 drawers each that have been bolted into the inside of the case, of the entire case. And so I've not seen a machinist chest that does this. Again, this would be, and it's possible, very possible that there were wooden drawers here at one point and they had been lost or for whatever reason, and the metal drawers were added later. However, because the metal drawers seem to fit exactly into this space, I'm going to believe that they were made specifically for them. So the way I've arranged it, these are watercolor and gouache, acrylic over here, and hobbyist tools here. So these are kind of older gouache tubes. I don't use these much anymore. This was my first gouache set. And so there's still some use there. I might use them, but that's where they're kept. And then I have some watercolors, sets here, different sets, and there's some little bit of white gouache. Some of the instructors that I follow will use watercolors and a little white gouache, so I have a tube of white gouache specifically for that, separate from the other sets of gouache paints that I have. And then more watercolor paint. Moving to the middle, this drawer has acrylic paint, and this is some of the first acrylic paint that I used. I'm not using it as much. I usually use the stuff that I have in here or in the tea chest. This drawer doesn't have anything in it, but I will show you what it looks like. It's compartmentalized. This has been used in the past as a jewelry, like a jewelry box, and so this is a great way to have compartmentalized your thing. But if you're going to do this the puzzle route, you can put your puzzles in there. This is Hanayama puzzles, flag, infinity, donut, ring 2, padlock, marble, and cake. All fit nicely inside and go right inside. And that's a great way to do that. So, moving on, next we already know about the acrylics. This one down here is some tools specifically for painting. These are different palette knives. This is actually a scraper, but I follow an instructor who uses that as a palette knife. And then some plastic palette knives from a hobby store. Great place to hold them. I use these with acrylic paints. Sometimes I will use this one with watercolor, especially for doing tree branches or tree trunks. Some instructors suggest using a fingernail. I like to use this. It gives me a better, or a card. Some suggest using a card. And so that's a great way to use that. So the final side we have, these items are all tools specific to general hobby work, but some of it can also be small woodworking tools, or metalworking tools, sort of. Start out with, we have erasers. There's usually some small tools here. We have clamps. These small clamps can be used for woodworking. Generally, they're some people who do plein air painting will use these to hold their paper or their book down to their easel. I don't do a lot of that, but if I did, I would start using those. This is plastic cement for old plastic models. I have a couple of those left over, and this is an eraser shield for. I got it when I did geography, cartography type work, but it's also great for drawing as well as planning for woodworking. Next drawer, we have a couple tools specific for small pliers. It's actually, these things are sold at hobby stores for doing jewelry work, but I bought them when I got into metal earth puzzles or metal kits. If some of you are familiar with those, I needed something to handle some of the small edges and the small little tabs that the metal earth items come with. It has other uses as well in general hobby. And then I have a couple, I'm a small Leatherman. That's kind of more of an office type, but it's got a nice knife, tweezers, things like that. And then another just little utility folding thing that I was given. That one has some pliers on it. And so it's a great place to hold that. And then the top shelf, the top drawer has a lot of serious hobby tools. I have a set of files, miniature files, and these can be used for woodworking, but they can also be used for other things as well. And so that's a great thing to have. I have a tweezer set, small tweezer set. There's a lot of things I get into working with small woodworking things, small kits, that sort of thing, that a set of tweezers, different sizes, is a great thing to have. I have an antique pair of pliers that I bought at an antique store one time. There we go. They're just very small, very delicate needle nose pliers. More tweezers, special tweezers. I have a set of Excel X-Acto knives in the Dutch chest. If you've seen that video, the pull-out tray has a whole set of these. But this is one that I have because this machinist chest stays in the house, stays in my sort of my studio upstairs, where I do the drafting, design work for woodworking, but also painting and other things. And so it's good to have one of these close at hand up there. And then other little things, we have you know, one of these sort of a dental mirror, as well as dental tools. And in fact, recently on a trip, I bought a set of 36 dental tools for just this kind of work, but it's too much to put in here. It's in its own sleeve, kept in another room. But at some point, I hope to get into that and do some work. I should note that a lot of the tools that were in here mimic the tools I use as a conservator. I'm primarily a furniture conservator, but I also do object conservation. And so a lot of the things like this, it's easy, you know, good for looking underneath of an object. You know, the dental tools are very helpful, tweezers, X-Acto knives, and even the small files. These are things that I use as a conservator, and I find using them at home is just as necessary. And so having them up here in this drawer is a great place to hold them. And that is my machinist chest hobby tool storage.